There's a lot of us on Zoom this month. I guess people are dealing with snow and ice.
All
I
right.
was thinking the same thing. I'm looking around. I'm like, wow, okay.
Well, there's
Yeah.
still closures and delays. So like Prince George is closed, Montgomery County, Frederick, they haven't even started yet. So
Right.
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
secondary roads are terrible. I mean, our office is not closed, so we've been open Monday since Monday, but
Mhm.
secondary roads are
Wow.
terrible.
Wow.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Oh, and hold on.
Morning.
I'm getting an echo here. All right. Hold on. Yeah. Let me. All right. Okay, that seemed to fix it. That was mine. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I usually join virtually so I can see everybody as well. So and I may have to put my glasses on because you're so small and I'm getting so old. So anyway, but good morning and Happy New Year. Welcome, everybody. And I'll call the meeting to order at 9:33, which considering the weather and the technology and so forth, everything, that's pretty good, I think. So for anybody who is actually, if you're watching on camera, I don't know what your view is, but let me tell you who is here with us in person. So we have Kelly and her staff are here. Sean is here in person. We also have Dr. Stanton is here and Miss Hadley is here along with myself. Oh, no doctor. All right. Forgive me if I get honoraries wrong. You're quite welcome to interrupt and correct. All right, so before we get started, again, Happy New Year, and it's good that you're online. That way you're safe and hopefully someplace where you don't have quite as much snow or ice. And a little bit more, I think, for us on the way on Friday night going into Saturday, maybe a little bit. We'll see. We'll kind of follow that as we go through. All right, so as we go through the order of business today, just a couple of reminders since we have so many people that are joining us online. I would prefer you not put the comments in the comment section, so let's not use the chat because that's a little bit hard to see. So if I fail to see you, oh, and by the way, Dr. Shockley is not able to join us today. I believe we sent her condolences because I believe she's had a death in the family. So that's why I'm kind of here alone right now. So that'll make it even harder to see comments in the chat and so forth because I don't have anybody as backup. So if you would, if I don't see you, feel free to just come off mic and get our attention. I think that'll work just fine. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, is there any recognition of guests that we need? Okay, we have Sean from MSCA is here.
Dr. Jason Keys from the Division of Educator Effectiveness, Mr. Keith Crumple from the Division of Educator Effectiveness, Dr. Juanita Ashby Bay from the Division of Educator Effectiveness are all with us today. And I believe that Alexandra Canberra, again from the same division, is with us online. And I believe Miss Fitzpatrick is here somewhere too.
All right, well, welcome everybody. We're honored to have you today. All right, so the next thing that we have is public comment, and I believe we have one request for public comment with the comments coming by way of email, it looks like.
She's here as well.
Oh, okay. So
She's online.
All right. So this is coming from, I'm just looking, who is Ms. Carter, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Carter, whenever you're ready, please go ahead. We welcome your comments.
Hello, good morning. Bear with me as I pull up my comment.
Sure, take your time.
Thank you. All right, I found my comments. All right. And I'm going to activate my camera. Sorry.
All right, and while we're doing that, we also have written transmittal as well, so that's in your packet. So if board members would like to bring that up while you get ready, that would be nice.
Okay, wonderful. I am ready, and I pardon my appearance. I normally dress more professionally, but I'm at the Disability Advocacy Day at the Maryland General Assembly, so I'm multitasking today. All right, so good morning. Oh, I'm ready. Is there a timer in view from you to be able to see?
Yes, usually I believe you have 3 minutes, correct?
Okay.
All right, and we do have someone keeping time. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning. My name is Alita Javi Carter. I'm the mother of two disabled children enrolled in Prince George's County Public Schools and also a non-practicing pediatric nurse practitioner. I have a number of concerns. Special education students' rights to a free, appropriate public education is guaranteed by IDEA, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and Title II of ADA are not being upheld and at times are blatantly violated because of the school systems and the states seem to understand the lack of oversight that there is. And while there are administrative remedies such as the dispute resolution process, they are lengthy, providing a year for resolution as a child continues to be harmed, are unlikely to have findings due to the burden of proof being on the family, and the families are completely unaware of this. There's just a lack of implementation with fidelity. Knowing that students who receive special education services are particularly vulnerable for violation of their educational and civil rights, a preventative stance should be taken to ensure that all staff complete mandatory training and are assessed on the content to ensure they are able to apply the knowledge to adequately practice in the academic environment. Understanding that the provision of a free, appropriate public education does not only apply to homeroom teachers or special educators, it applies to teachers who instruct specials, cafeteria workers, recess attendants, substitute teachers, and any other professional or adult that is entrusted with our children. Harm occurs when students are placed in a least restrictive environment without ensuring sufficient training, support, services, or accommodations are in place for meaningful inclusion. PGCPS has developed a harmful hiring practices of not vetting educators to ensure they maintain their certifications, obtain their certifications, and fail to hire individuals for special education leadership roles who have obtained a degree in special education, which enables them to understand the theory and the science to translate research into the classroom. Many general education teachers are not equipped nor supported in meaningful ways to teach special education students. Functional behavioral assessments and behavioral intervention plans are not understood, or the situations for when they should be utilized, such as new behaviors, increase in frequency or severity of behaviors, or when the failures of implementation or monitoring when it comes to response to intervention or multi-tiered systems of support. Which leads to higher risk for disproportionate disciplinary practices such as suspensions, to include informal removals, which technically are supposed to count as suspensions, but families are not often informed that they should, and administrators and teachers instead call parents to pick up their children from school for early dismissal as opposed to informing them that it should count as a suspension. Additionally, families are told that they are not allowed to have a 504 and an IEP in place simultaneously, which is not legally correct. There have been numerous failures to provide students with accommodations for iReady and DIBELS, and then those results are used without taking into account the data that addresses the student's specific needs, or failing to use the data when it reflects atypical performance. There have been failures to abide by the manufacturer's instructions, and there are also additional concerns, and I'm wrapping up. There are additional concerns with failure to use data for extended school year decisions, which is supposed to be measured over a break, and then knowledge deficits when it comes to compliance leadership at the school system level. I would hope that there would be a collaborative solution created to address this at a system level statewide and not just kind of a Band-Aid or temporary approach. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Carter, thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us. And just so you know, generally when people come to make public comment, we listen, it enters the record, and we thank you for providing us with a hard copy summary of your comments as well. There generally is not a question and answer session afterwards, so please don't take that to mean anything other than that's just policy. But we do appreciate your comments very much, and we will certainly look at them.
Thank you so much.
All
Have
right.
a great, bye-bye.
Yep, bye-bye. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome, bye.
Darren?
Yes.
Good morning, it's Debbie. I couldn't find in all my Kelly Meadows emails when that came.
No, the
Did you-
email has not been submitted to
Right.
everyone yet. It was just on the table.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right. Yeah, so if you were here, yeah, you probably picked one up. That can be sent out, correct? All right, certainly we'll take care of that. All right, thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I would also just remind the board we've had public comment at our last meeting as well, with some similar comments that were being made. So I think we probably will need to begin to discuss this and think about it at future meetings. All right, any questions or comments? All right, we move on now to our state board update. Kelly, do you have anything for that? Yes. Okay.
Good morning. I took 6 flights of stairs, so apologies. I'm a little huffy and puffy, out of shape. Good morning. I wanted to provide a little update on what the state board has been up to in our December meeting, as well as what we plan to address in our joint AIB MSDE meeting in January. So I'll start with December. Sorry. So we accepted the final report that was presented to us from the Assessment and Accountability Task Force. There was a set of recommendations, and we just accepted those on a almost unanimous basis. We also adopted the Foundations of Reading Assessment as an option for demonstrating proficiency in teaching reading. As Kelly shared during that presentation, it is a widely used one, so it is just another option as an import state. We also voted to adopt the guidelines for the availability of student participation in telehealth. That was statutorily required for the state board to adopt those regulations. So those are now in place, and LEAs are putting together policies relating to providing telehealth services in the school building. We voted not to adopt a proposed definition related to teacher working time. That ended up not passing the state board in December. We had a couple of opinions and orders. I think most of them are pretty run-of-the-mill. The biggest one that you might have heard about is the matter of commensurate funding for Frederick County charter schools. That was just addressing, since Maryland is in a pretty unique position where we don't have a ton of statutory language governing charter schools. Most of that comes through state board rulings. So this ruling addresses how to marry the blueprint funding streams with the very small statutory language that mandates commensurate funding for charter schools. So we put together some guidelines for districts to use when when working and negotiating with their charters about the funding that each charter school will receive. And that's been pretty well received. In January, we plan in our joint AIB meeting, we're going to get an update on NBC. That's just an information-only item. And then we will also be in both our Education Policy Committee and then in the full board voting to adopt some regulations that have come to us previously as permission to publish, and now I don't believe, Kelly would know better, but I don't believe we've gotten a ton of public comment on these. So we will be voting to adopt a couple of licensure regs and the regulations for the incentive program for the National Board Certification. And then we will be voting to publish the induction program regulation. So we will be getting kind of a full presentation from the department on those, and then voting both in the policy committee and in the full board to publish those regulations for public comment. And that is what we have been up to on the state board side in December and this month. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you so much for the overview. Does anybody have any questions or comments? And while you're pondering those, our room is getting crowded because Ms. Yoho has joined us as well. I'm not going to have room in here if we keep up. Anyway, we're glad that you made it. All right, back to questions or comments. Kelly.
I just wanted to provide a little bit more information on the Foundations of Reading Assessment. So the Foundations of Reading Assessment is an assessment that measures proficiency in reading, teaching reading, aligned to the science of reading. And we have had an assessment, as most of you know, for many years that we have required for several of our licensure areas. And this Foundations of Reading assessment is a comparable assessment, which then allows the test taker to choose between the two. And one of the reasons that we felt it was important to adopt this assessment as well is because so many states use it. And given that we're an import state, you know, telling someone that's already passed the Foundations of Reading assessment, which is a Pearson Evaluation Services product, that they have to go take the ETS Praxis, a comparable assessment, just wasn't the message that we wanted to send. So again, in the spirit of removing unnecessary barriers, the State Board was eager to adopt that assessment.
All right, great, thank you. Anyone else?
Just follow up on that, Kelly. So they'll have in-state folks will have a choice between that and the tree?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And you'll get a memorandum shortly.
All right, I see lots of head nods. I think that's positively,
Just, sorry,
Received.
Darren, I think my little yellow hand is like blending in.
that's all right. Go ahead, just jump in.
Just a quick question. I think Kelly just answered it. Last month, we received a really great memo that kind of outlined all that she provided orally to us, verbally to us. Will we receive a similar memorandum of today's update?
On the state board, for the state board action items?
Yes, ma'am. Last month, it was written memorandum that we received in addition to the verbal. And so I was just wondering if we're going to receive that as well.
Yes, we can absolutely. We put together, it's a summary of actions taken. We put together that after every board meeting, and Dr. Wright signs off on it after everyone, and we can make that a practice going forward of sharing those. I believe last month you probably already got the December summary of actions, but I can definitely make that a practice of sending those along after every board meeting to you all, just so that you are aware, if that's helpful.
It's very helpful. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Absolutely.
All right, anyone else? All right, and before you leave, Ms. Oakley, on a personal note, being January, probably a lot of us made those New Year's resolutions to get into better shape. Okay, well, I took the elevator. And the fact that you took the stairs and were out of breath actually is an inspiration to me, and I'm sure a lot of people. So that was great.
I would have taken the elevator, but the elevator is so slow, and so I was forced to take the stairs.
There's only one working this morning too. Yeah.
Well, the fact that you're still faster on the stairs than the elevator is still, I think, an inspiration.
Yeah, well, this building is very old, so I don't know if that's really a thing that I should be proud of, that I beat a 1930s elevator, but
Well, good, you should. And for anybody who's not here, we did have a change because Dunkin' Donuts is providing our refreshments, and I took that too. So anyway, I need to live better. All right. All right, so the next part that we have is the communications update, and I'll go to Kelly again. Did you have anything for that?
I do not.
All right. And we did talk about how we would produce communication, by the way, between us and the State Board of Education in regard to teacher induction programs and so forth. So that memo has been prepared. I've reviewed it. I think it looks fine. So we'll kind of finalize sending that out to the State Board. All right. And I'm going to throw this in now just because I'm remembering it, even though it probably goes more with the agenda. Kelly checked, and we have in our agenda 3 board meetings, July 10th, October 10th, and November 13th, where the conference room is not available.
The boardroom is not available.
Or the boardroom is not available. The conference room would be.
Yes.
So there was a question, and Dr. Ebony and I talked about it a little bit, as to whether we wanted to take those meetings. And just remember, usually in July we don't meet at all, although that can change. But we take those meetings, the July 10th, October 10th, and November 13th, and just have them be online. That would save a lot of trouble. But I wanted to, before, that was my thought along with Dr. Shockley's. Before I decided to do that, I just wanted to check and see if that meets the board's approval. Is there anybody who would object to having those meetings virtual, like total virtual? All right, seeing nothing, then those will move to virtual then. All right, any other communications that we need to share, including anything that's going on in anybody's neck of the woods.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in real quick. Can you repeat that? Like, will there be something sent out to remind us that those meetings are virtual so we don't just show up?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and usually we make a determination about the July meeting just based on what we have on the agendas leading up to that as to whether we need to meet or not. A lot of people are on vacation, and it's very hard to get a quorum in July. Although we did meet this year in July, I think we did. Yeah, so, but that was kind of an aberration. All right, anybody else? All right, so the next item is the career ladder license principal tier criteria consultation, and Kelly, you're leading us through that.
Would you mind terribly if we reverse them? Because after making this agenda, I realized that we should really understand where the board is at with regard to the licensure requirements, because they are such a big piece of the criteria. Can we reverse these?
Of course. So you would like to then move on to the administrator licensure permission to publish?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So without objection, and I don't see anybody, let's go ahead and change the agenda. So right now we're going to move to the 10:40 a.m. to 11 a.m. slot. You're looking at Comar 13A 120505. That's administrator licensure permission to publish. We looked at this last week, or rather at our last meeting and so forth. You'll see that I believe you got a cover letter that goes through and kind of explains the process, and this is good especially for anybody who's new to the board. So the first part of that is just looking at the process of how creating Comar actually works. Then there's an executive summary of the work group that you see, and then there are bullet points for the recommendation from the work group. And then, or actually that's showing you the membership of the work group. And then that also showed you what the 3 recommendations were for the work group. All right, and then after that, you actually have what we're looking to publish. All right, so if you want to find those documents, as Kelly gets ready, that will help you get through.
And the regulations that we're going to look at are the ones with the header .05, supervisors of instruction, assistant principals, and principals.
All right, whenever you're ready.
So the purpose of this item is to request that the board grant permission to publish amendments, significant amendments to the Comar 13A 120505, supervisors of instruction, assistant principals, and principals. This is the initial licensure requirements for those groups of individuals. So to be a supervisor of instruction in a public school, non-public special ed program, or state-operated school, an assistant principal or a principal, these are the licensure regulations that one would need to meet in order to earn that credential and serve in those positions. So I know we discussed this last month, but if it's okay, I'm just going to go through everything again. As Darren shared, we did meet with a work group on several occasions, and this was part of their charge to make recommendations for amendments to this particular regulation. Several of those individuals are on this board and are with us today, so please jump in if I leave anything out. So there are the biggest high-level changes that you're going to see with this regulation is one, the elimination of the two-tiered structure. So for several years now, we've had a licensure structure for administrators where it's been administrator 1, and that administrator 1 license is for assistant principals and supervisors of instruction. And then to move into that principalship, you would have to earn the administrator 2. And in the current regulations that we're proposing be amended, the way that you would do that is to take an assessment. So really the bulk of the content that you would need and the experience lives in that administrator 1 eligibility criteria, and then to add the 2, you would pass the assessment, which is currently the school leaders licensure assessment, which is an ETS product. So you're not going to see that structure in the recommended amendments. What you're going to see is very similar to what we currently have. There are multiple pathways to earn the licensure, but there are some minimum requirements. Regardless of how you earn that license, there are some minimum qualifications that you must have, and that's what you're going to find in B. And so that's really where we'll start, because A, it just tells you who is this for, and that's not changing. B, first, so if we look at B2, this is where we see those minimum requirements. So the first minimum requirement, which is we're not recommending this change, is a master's degree or higher from an accredited institution of higher education. So again, this is not a departure from the current regulations. The second minimum requirement is 27 months of effective teaching performance or effective performance as a certified specialist as defined in COMAR 13A1204. And as I'm looking at this, I need to strike the word certified, and it should just say specialist. This is also a carryover from the current regulations. And then the third is that 3 semester hours of coursework in special education that can be completed through traditional college university coursework or through Maryland approved continuing professional development credits. And this again is a holdover from the current regulations. So none of this section is new. The work group did not make recommendations to change these minimum qualifications. So having met all 3 of those, we go into the next piece, which now we've got some options. Some of them are the same as what we currently have, and some of them are a little bit different, and I'll point out the differences. So the first one is a Maryland approved administrator preparation program approved by the MSDE and MHEC, and that is currently what we offer. And these are our administrator licensure programs in Maryland. The second one is an approved administrator licensure program in another state. So that state has approved that licensure program to lead to administrator licensure based on that state's standards. This has been modified a little bit because we have added language to ensure that a supervised clinical practicum is part of that out-of-state program. The third option is what we commonly refer to as a transcript analysis or credit count option. 18 semester hours of graduate coursework taken at an institution of higher education to include coursework in the following categories, and these have been modified somewhat. The first category is curriculum, instruction, and assessment. That is the same as what it currently reads. The second one is supervision, evaluation, and supporting instructional improvement. This has been modified slightly, and the supporting instructional improvement is new language. The third course is legal issues and ethical decision making. This is the same as what it currently reads. 4 is program/school administration. Again, this one's been altered slightly. 5 is a new area of coursework, culturally responsive leadership and/or equity in leadership. And we still see the supervised clinical practicum. However, the work group did recommend that we have a minimum of 240 clock hours for the requirement of that practicum experience. That minimum number of hours is a new requirement. And this is in alignment with what we require of our Maryland approved programs that lead to administrator licensure. The next pathway is what we commonly refer to as an experienced professional pathway. So an individual who holds a valid professional state license in administration from another state or country and can demonstrate that they have 5 years of effective performance as an administrator in a PK-12 school setting, that is also a way in. So those are the 4 pathways to licensure once you meet those minimum qualifications. But if you flip over to the next page, there is one more piece of the regulation. And what this says is that anyone who qualifies based on B or C and B is that out-of-state program, and C is the transcript analysis. So basically the ones that we have less control over the quality. These individuals do have to also take the assessment. And again, currently we would use the school leader's licensure assessment for this purpose. So again, individuals who go through a Maryland approved program or who are coming in demonstrating 5 years of effective performance as a school administrator under an out-of-state license, they do not have to take the assessment. But those individuals who complete an out-of-state program or do the transcript analysis route will have to take the assessment, and that is new. But again, we've combined the 1 and 2 licensure tiers. So at the end of the day, under this model, you would get a license that says administrator, and you would be able to serve as a supervisor of instruction, an assistant principal, or principal. And this is what most states do, which is why the work group ended up making the recommendation to move away from the 2-tiered structure.
Of course.
This is super helpful. Thank you so much, Kelly. Can you share the sort of meaningful difference between 3B and 3D?
I'm sorry, 3B and 3D?
Yeah.
Yes. So let me give you an example.
Yeah.
So let's say I go to the University of Delaware and I go through an administrator licensure program that the University of Delaware offers that's approved by the Delaware State Department of Education to lead to licensure as an administrator. So I go through that program, but I have no I want to come to Maryland and I want to serve in Maryland. So you would bring that University of Delaware program into Maryland. We would look at that, confirm, oh, it's got that clinical practicum. Delaware has approved this to lead to licensure. Now you've got to take the SLLA, and then you can become licensed in Maryland. The difference is down in D, I have served in Delaware for 5 years, and I have demonstrated that I'm an effective administrator in Delaware, and so there's an experience component that's missing in B.
That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
Yes, I have a question. I'm looking at section B2B. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Where it says 27 months of effective teaching performance or effective performance as a certified specialist as defined in COMAR 13A 1204. And I was wondering if it's possible for the language to specify that the experience can be from any state so that there isn't any confusion that the 27 months has to be from a Maryland district or institution. And so then the language would say 27 months of effective teaching performance or effective performance as a certified specialist in any state, and then see COMAR 13A 1204.
So the absence of, because we don't see that it has to be in Maryland, there should be no issues with interpretation. I hear you. I absolutely understand. It's not normally the way that we write regulations.
And I would echo that too. Yeah, a lot of times if it's implied, what I think starts to happen, and I believe your point is completely valid, but as written, it seems as though it still gets to that.
Yeah, one of the things we could do though is we could potentially strike as defined in COMAR 13A 1204. The reason that we point back to 04 is to let people know, like, that's what we mean by specialists. We mean school counselors, we mean school social workers, but technically we don't need that language. So if that's the confusion, which I could see that being confusion, we could potentially strike that.
All right, what's the feeling of the board on striking that? Is there any discussion on that? Is there anybody who would see a problem with striking it?
Just a clarifying question. So the COMAR 13A 12.4 is specifically for specialists as opposed to classroom teachers?
It's the chapter for specialists.
Gotcha.
Yep. I think Dr. Allen has her hand raised again.
Oh, sure, go ahead. If I don't see you,
Have to
make
put
sure
it
you
down.
mic it. Okay. All right, anybody else? Pardon me. All right, so I don't see any concern about striking the COMAR part, if that's what we're going to do. So if we strike it, it would read 27 months of effective teaching performance or effective performance as a specialist.
Correct.
Period.
Darren, this is Dr. Taylor. I have a question. Can we change language in COMAR?
Well, we're just doing the permission to publish at this point.
Yep, now's the time. Yep.
Yeah, so if we're going to change it, now's when we change it.
Okay.
There's an opportunity, of course, after it goes out, after a period of, 60 days?
30.
30, okay. So it goes out for publication. We then can gather public comment and so forth, and then the board decides whether we want to go back and make changes.
But now
Based
is
on public
a
comment.
better time because the promulgation process will restart for everything that we change after that public comment period.
Yeah, better
Every
to get it.
substantive change.
Yeah, better to get it exactly the way the board wants it. Because if we go back and any of the changes are substantial, then right, the whole process starts again, so it takes a long time. Now, that's not to suggest that, we need to move fast. I think this board's always been deliberative and we make good choices because sometimes we do move slow. But that is the process, so now's the time to do it.
Just another question. Is the 240 clock hours, is that kind of industry standard, or would people from other states be potentially unable to meet that requirement?
I have to take that back because I know something drove the 240 when we put it in our preparation regulations, but I can't tell you off the top of my head what standards we were looking at, if they were the PSOLs, if we were looking at something else.
And I don't recall either. Anybody else?
Yes,
Joy?
Darren, can I ask another question?
Oh, well, of course.
So, and this might be for down the road if these are adopted, but let's say someone currently only has an Administrator 1 license. Would they then be grandfathered into the full administrator licensure, or would they have to reapply? Like, let's say their program, their previous Maryland approved program didn't have a culturally responsive teaching or pedagogy course. Would they then have to resubmit coursework, or is it similar to what we've done with the teacher licensure that they would be able to renew or reapply for licensure based on previous certification?
So it's more the latter. So when we change a licensure area as significantly as we're recommending we change this one, there's no grandfathering. So, but what will result naturally is if you were an individual, let's say, that went through a Maryland approved program, and you have the Administrator 1 license, you will naturally qualify for this new administrator license because you've already demonstrated that you've met these requirements. So that individual would have to submit an endorsement request. We would have all of their materials and we would issue the administrator, the new administrator license, because they no longer have that SLLA requirement. However, let's say you came in transcript analysis and you were on Administrator 1, you got an Administrator 1 license. If you want to then add this new administrator license that allows you to be a principal, you would have to come back to the table and demonstrate you've got this new coursework. So the culturally responsive leadership and or equity in leadership, you may or may not have that. And if you don't, you'd have to take it. And then for the ones that we've tweaked a little bit, that's probably not going to be an issue because we, again, just slightly modified them. It's that culturally responsive leadership that they're going to have to bring to the table.
Did that answer the question, Joy? Okay.
Kelly, it's Cheryl. Darren, good
Sure.
morning. It's Cheryl Dyson. Just a little bit under the weather, so that's why my camera is off today. But can we go back for just a second to B2B? Kelly, earlier you were saying that the word certified should be struck, right? So then it would read, if we take out as defined in COMAR 13A.12.04, then it would just read 27 months of effective teaching performance or effective performance as a specialist.
Yes.
So I will go along with the group. I just think if we're going to take out certified, then I prefer to have for people to know where to go to see what a specialist is. So that I think clear is kind. And if there's no other place to like sort of codify what a specialist is, what we mean by that in Maryland, I would prefer to keep the COMAR in or keep certified in. But I just wanted to go on record to say I think it's clear to me when we add the COMAR language because often different LEAs have specialists for different things. And so I think, you know, as clear as we can be is always healthy, but I will go with the group. My second question was in 4, the qualifying score. So where would that be notated if it's not here?
It will be notated in policy. We do not put scores in regulation, Dr. Dyson, purposefully because we'd have to promulgate every time we change the scores.
Absolutely, I get it. I just wanted to know where exactly it would be.
I see. It will be on our website, and then every time we change a score, we also we have a resource that we send to all of our licensure partners in our districts and our educator preparation programs that shows all of our assessment requirements.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, and I think we have a follow-up comment to that as well from Ms. Yoho.
Thank you. And it's not just because she's the superintendent from my county. I was having the same kind of question, like, okay, because Kelly had to start by saying, like, guidance counselors, and I thought, okay, is this something that everybody's going to know, or is there a place we should go to find out? So I think having the language in there of where to go, that struck me as something that might be lacking if we took it out. So.
All right, and just kind of reading the room, it looks as though the concerns that were raised by Dr. Dyson, I think that was received by the group as well. If we were to address that concern and we would keep either either the word certified or the COMAR citation, what's the best way to handle it, do you think, Kelly?
I think to keep the COMAR citation in would be the best way to handle it, and strike certified.
Is there a reason?
To strike it?
Mm-hmm.
Because
why is that the best option?
Because, like Dr. Dyson said, it clearly points to a chapter in our regulations. So if there's ever any question about who are we talking about here, you can flip to that chapter and see the areas.
And that'll clear it up.
Yep.
So it's just the easiest way to do it. Okay, that makes sense. Is there anybody on the board now?
Darren?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, please.
If you remember, the work group went over that extensively when we were doing all of this.
Right. And of course, Dr. Taylor was on the work group.
Right. No. I mean, and in sorry, cherry on top of this conversation as far as why to strike the word certified. It's also an outdated term because we've switched to licensure now. So, yeah.
All right. So let me just ask, is there anybody who would object to striking the word certified but keeping as defined in COMAR? All right, so I believe that's what we'll do. So the word certified is now struck, but we have decided to keep as defined in COMAR 13A1204. All right, any other questions or comments?
Should we change certified then to licensed?
We can. I don't think it's necessary.
It's easiest just take it out, correct? Is what I'm thinking. One thing the group did do was a pretty good deep dive into what this area of certification looks like in our surrounding states, especially since we're an import state. And one of the things that I was concerned about is would we soften the rigor and the requirements? And we didn't do that. And there certainly could have been a temptation to do that because, no offense to any of the other states, but some don't have quite the stringent guidelines that I think are gatekeepers that we had. So I was quite happy that the group kept it, and in some places I think we improved on it. And that was also going back to echo what Kelly said. That was one of the reasons too why there was the collapsing of the admin 1 and admin 2, because really we were one of the only states that did that. All right, continued questions or comments? And where we're going is a permission to publish vote. But before we do that, I want to make sure we've had all the conversation we need.
Can I ask another question?
Of course.
I guess I'm emboldened by the small group in person here. Last time we met, we had talked about national board certification as an admin requirement too. I'm not seeing that here. Is that a different bucket of? Okay.
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. And after this discussion, we will kind of move into that second piece. And so when we get into the requirement for national board, which is a requirement beginning July 1st, 2029, I believe, to move into a principal position, that is about assignment. And that's a statutory requirement, which we are recommending that we keep separate from the licensure requirement for administrators because, as a reminder, our non-public schools and our state-operated facilities, both of which have to license their educators the same way public schools do not have career ladders. It's the same statutes do not apply to them. So we would be setting up a situation where an individual would need national board to work in a position that doesn't require it.
All right, anyone else? If you're looking at this too and you're thinking, well, there are other requirements that could have been added, remember our board did, in the creation of recertification with professional development points, put in some new requirements for admin as well. So I think the two together, they actually work quite well together. So if you were thinking, well, remember this board had concerns about attracting and maintaining quality teachers, which is a primary role, a significant role of an administrator. That's something that they would get when they recertify as well. So, you know, we didn't want to overpack it with too much, especially in regard to requirements that are already in place for higher ed. But I think this, balanced with the PDPs, really did get to a good portion of the concerns that we've had. All right, is there any other discussion on this? All right, well then I will entertain a motion for permission to publish .05 supervisors of instruction, assistant principals, and principals with the changes that have been suggested. And I believe the change was to drop the word certified in B to B. Did I miss anything? All right, so I'll entertain a motion to publish.
I will move that we ask for permission to publish .05 supervisors of instruction, assistant principals, and principals.
All right, I need a second.
Dr. Taylor.
Dr. Taylor, quick on the button.
Hey, I worked on the work group.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, Dr. Ken. All right, any other further discussion? All right, do we need to do like a person by person, like a roll call since we're online, or can we still do a, Sean just stepped out?
I think everyone can probably just raise their hand.
All right. So anybody who is in favor of adopting this as moved, permission to publish, I'm sorry, not adoption, but permission to publish, signify by raising your hand. All right.
My hand raised.
All right. And all people present in person have raised hands. Is there anybody who objects? I see none. Do we have any abstentions? All right, so we have permission to publish.
Just want to share appreciation for the work group, and this is just really exciting, like the pathways that exist. So just shout out, kudos to the work group. It's great.
Thank you. All right, so now we will move back to what was under the time slot of 10:10 a.m. on the agenda. That's career ladder, licensed principal tier criteria consultation. And I believe I did have it with me. There is a handout that went with that, which says proposed recommendation criteria to move to licensed principal tier. Is that correct? All right, so you're looking for a document that looks like this. And it will have in very large print proposed recommendations at the top. And under that, it will read criteria to move to licensed principal tier. All right, ready when you are.
Absolutely. So this is an item for consultation. So very much like we did during our last meeting when we looked at the induction regulations, what the purpose of this discussion is for the board to decide what recommendations, if any, to provide the State Board of Education specifically for this set. Because the State Board of Education and Law is the board that will establish the criteria to move to the licensed principal tier. So we discussed at length what the recommendations were from the work group during our last meeting. I'll go over them again, and then I'm going to be taking notes. And from, based on the board's discussion and what is finally decided as far as recommendations, I will draft a memorandum for Darren to sign that will go to the State Board of Education for consideration as they look at this item when it is brought to them. So that's what we're doing at this point. So if we take a look at the proposed recommendations, again, this was the second part of the charge of the work group. They made the recommendations for the licensure requirements, and you're going to see here the very first criterion is you have to meet the licensure requirements, right? So I'm going to assume that this board is okay with 1 because you've just voted, you've just granted permission to publish those regulations. So I assume that there are no concerns there. So let's go ahead and jump to 2. Now, again, I'm going to point out to you what is in statute. Now, if this board has concerns about what's in statute, that's fine. And we can certainly discuss those and we can put those in the memorandum. I'm just letting you know what is in statute and what's not. So for number 2, holding an advanced professional license, again, in that administrator area, or being on level 3 of the career ladder as an NBCT is in the law. That's basically a summary of level 3 of the career ladder. And so that is a criteria because one would have to meet level 3 to get to level 4. So I'll start there. And if it's okay, let's go by number so I can take notes based on each of them. Are there any concerns with having to hold an advanced professional license in administration or be an NBCT prior to stepping into that level 4 licensed principal position? Okay.
Okay, don't see any.
All right, so let's move to number 3. Which is an effective evaluation. And again, this is in statute. What the statute says is that for any level of the career ladder, in order to move up, one has to have had an effective evaluation the previous year.
And that's just 1 year? Or would they have to have multiple effective? I mean, I know we have in the Comar language 3 years.
So the
or 27
law,
months.
so the law doesn't say anything more than the previous year. However, if this board feels like the criteria should be more to move to that principal role, and again, this is take licensure out of it. So you've got your 3 years of teaching or specialist to get that license. You've got it. Now we're talking about, okay, I'm going to move up the career ladder. So let's say I'm an assistant principal and I'm sitting on level 3 of the career ladder. In order to be considered for level 4, I have to have been effective as an assistant principal as I'm applying for that position. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we say effective evaluation for this piece. Okay. Looks like Dr. Taylor, do you have your hand up?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no.
All right, so moving to number 4. Again, this comes out of the law. The law states that the LEA determines that the individual is ready to take on the additional responsibilities required by the position. Any concern with that language?
Are there specifics about who in the LEA determines that?
Let me bring up the law. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. Yes. Teacher leaders, other licensed principals, and distinguished principals in the county shall provide a list of qualified candidates to the local superintendent. So I think that's worth discussing. Are there any concerns that this board would like to share about that process in statute or recommendations?
I'm sorry, Kelly, can you repeat that? The positions.
Absolutely. It says teacher leaders. So this is referring to teachers on level 4 of the career ladder. Other licensed principals and distinguished principals, which is the tier after the licensed principal, in the county shall provide a list of qualified candidates to the local superintendent.
Any comments?
Is there like a process for that? Like, what does that look like?
So one of the things that LEAs will need to do is develop a process.
So I'm assuming they would have to get together a group or a board that would actually look and then look over who was interested and then make recommendations what to send on. That would be one way to do it, correct?
That would be one way to do it.
Is the process approved by MSDE?
The process, I'm assuming that process will be fleshed out as part of the LEA career ladder submissions due July 1st, 2025, and they are approved by the AIB.
So these also aren't necessarily individuals that have worked directly with the person, right?
Not necessarily.
Now, since this is in statute, even if we had concerns, the only way that it would be addressed is if the law changes, correct?
That's correct, but we could still share our concerns if there are some.
Exactly. And we've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to clarify.
All right, so I have another question then. For that, I'm looking at the number 2 under the proposed NBC waiver language because it seems really similar. You had said teacher leaders, other principals. Is it a requirement that all 3 of those parties, the distinguished principals, are part of that list creation, or can it come from any of the above? The
Right,
statute
that's what
says
the
all 3?
statute says. I'm reading from the law. Now, it's probably going to be some time before we see distinguished principals and, professor and or distinguished and distinguished professor teachers, because it will take a while to build that cadre. So if they aren't there, they aren't there. But the law does say all 3 of those. Yes.
All right, anyone else? Yeah, Ms. Yoho.
So I actually do, or had, before I let it lapse, my certification to be an administrator, but it's been so many years since I even tried to go through the process. I'm trying to remember, what it looked like. Everybody has to already have a process in place currently, right, in order to get people in the pipeline. I'm just trying to envision, what else would it be if it's not these people, or, what do other people have? Just, otherwise I'm kind of just at a roadblock in my thinking of, is this good or is this not good? So, sorry.
No, that's a good question.
I would have to lean on our LEA administrators who are involved in the hiring process to answer those questions. I assume there are 24 different processes for hiring principals in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So just to follow up, that's, I guess, kind of where I was going, is is this reasonable? Is this revolution? I mean, is this kind of what they're already doing, or would this be a brand new thing, fit in with what they're already doing? And I guess that's who we need to hear from, is if anybody is involved in that kind of process already.
I would tend to believe that this is something that's newer, because some of the parties involved in that group that's just listed, I don't think are involved in the current processes that are in place.
So in other words, you probably have to bring some more people in that meet the criteria of the statute. But it might not necessarily mean a complete overhaul of how the process works. You may just need to include certain people.
Can I ask a clarifying question? And sorry, I should know this. Is number 4 new language or no?
Do you mean new in the statute?
Mm-hmm.
No.
No.
Not since, I don't believe this language has changed since 2021.
Okay.
And kind of correct me, I don't know if I want to quite go down this road, but correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, and when we go back to, I think the fact that you said, with 24 LEAs and they all do things slightly different, that was one of the questions that came up with number 3 when it said effective evaluation. Because my concern was that, shouldn't that read highly effective evaluation? Because you could conceivably have me as a teacher who is highly effective, and the person who is evaluating me is just effective. And that seems to create a breach in leadership in my mind. And we discussed that quite a bit, and Dr. Taylor as well, jump in. But I think one of the concerns was there are lots of different definitions and different LEAs as to what highly effective means, and therefore that might create challenges. And that led to another discussion by which we said, well, should there, and this is for another day, but the fact that different LEAs might define that term differently and what it takes to get there based on the rubrics they've created for teacher evaluation, there might need to be some thought as to whether we have some uniformity to that so that there is some guardrails as to what is highly effective. But I'll be honest with you, and I understood why we kept the word effective evaluation. So I didn't push harder for it because I understood the challenges of doing it. But at the same time, it still concerns me. Because if we're going to get to, I've worked over 30 years, and I can tell you, as a teacher, when you have a highly effective administrator to help you and guide you, that has a huge impact and has had a huge impact. But there are also times where, quite frankly, and I don't mean to disparage anyone, but where sometimes if you're being coached by someone who frankly is at a lower skill level, you stagnate. So I've always wanted the term highly effective, and if we're really going to move where we need to be, and I love how the career ladder, has teacher coaches and things like that written into it. I don't think it just has to be an administrator. That's going to be a problem because we still, by this process, potentially can put administrators in who are just effective. They're not highly effective. So you see what I'm saying? So I'm okay with leaving it. Please don't misunderstand. But I also think we probably at some point, and I don't know if it's even the purview of our board to do it, but at some point, the problems that have caused us to leave the word effective versus highly effective probably need to be addressed. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and you're correct. But I think the problem was we could not come up with a definition, agree upon a definition of highly effective. And I think that's why we just left it at effective. But I agree with you.
Yeah, and that's right. I agree with your recollection as well.
I would also just add to that conversation that there are, I'm not going to call them out, but there are at minimum 2 districts that never give highly effective and only give effective. Because in their systems, in their mind, people aren't highly effective. That's what you aspire to. That's not what you are. And so then that would put us in a situation where there's at minimum 2 districts for which no principal would ever be considered highly effective. And that's problematic.
And that did come up in the discussion, I remember.
And that, it came up.
I'll add to that too. We're saying we have potentially 24 different systems. I would argue we may have hundreds because of all the variation that exists within school districts as well, right? So even, within Baltimore City, every principal is not necessarily being rated in the same way on the same scale. So I think I love the idea of striving for excellence, and also I worry about what that would mean for our principal pipeline too. I think it's definitely something to aspire toward, but I think first we need to get normed on what highly effective looks like across every district across the state.
Yeah, and that being said, in making these comments, I'm not pushing necessarily to get rid of, the autonomy that LEAs have and should enjoy, but I think there should be probably some minimums that are in place or some guidance, because again, we can't fix this language, and it's troubling to me. So I go back, I think what you said is right on the money. I think there are ways we could probably do this without robbing districts of the autonomy that they, as I said, have and should enjoy to tailor things based on their population's needs and so forth. Yeah. But I think you can have some guardrails in place. That's what this board does.
Yeah, I think in a similar vein, that was kind of the spirit behind the question I asked about, is this just 1 year of effective evaluation? Because, you might get lucky with your evaluator.
In the position that you're then in. So in the example that I used, it would be your evaluation as an assistant principal is what would be considered to move into the principalship.
And in some places, I'm sorry, go ahead, Josh.
Is there already language in place that says there's a minimum amount of years that you have to be in your previous position before you move up to principal?
No, this is where that would live. And we talked about it at length during the work group, and we didn't end up making that recommendation. But it is something that would be a criteria that lives here.
Well, it is. It's tough stuff. Yes. All right, so remember, we're going through this more as consultation. And again, this is going to require some deeper thought. It certainly did for the work group. As we think about the agenda for the next meeting, taking this back, thinking it through, coming back again, I think that's something we
can bring this into the next meeting rather than end the conversation here. I'll follow your lead.
Okay.
For this piece, I just want to make sure I've captured what I've heard. It sounds like there's a question surrounding, how to standardize evaluations across the state in a way that still provides LEAs with autonomy, but provides guardrails so that it's an equitable rating process. And so I've noted that.
Is there anything else that Kelly needs to know based on conversations that we've had?
Kelly, this is Joy. Could you please repeat what you just said? Because I had a problem with number 4 and how it was. It's just kind of I read it. It's like ready to determine that they're ready to, and I'm like, what's ready? Like, what do they have? Like objectives and goals? Like, is there some sort of instrument out there now? Is that what you were just saying?
No, so actually, Joy, I was referring to 3, the effective evaluation piece. So it sounds like, there's some concern that the evaluation model right now isn't standardized in a way that we're confident.
Okay.
That a highly effective specifically means the same thing in a Baltimore City as it does in a Montgomery County as it does in a Hartford or Cecil. So the question is, what do we need to do to get to a place where the guardrails or the parameters and the guidelines are strong enough to where we feel confident that those evaluation measures are equitable across the state?
Okay, I understand that. And then I get to the number 4, and how is it determined that the individual is ready to take on additional responsibilities? Is it because they've met the the effective evaluation? Like that just kind of seems very,
Yeah. So what the law says is that by LEA, teacher leaders, other licensed principals, and distinguished principals should provide a list of qualified candidates to the local superintendent. So that kind of goes, along with 4, because the question was asked, well, who's the LEA in this situation, and how do they determine? So what I heard there and what I've noted, and let me know if I need to note more, is I heard somebody ask the question, is this reasonable? I heard the question, are LEAs already doing this to some extent? What will it take to assemble a team to do this or the process to do this? A lot of questions.
and how are they like? How's
it being measured?
Yeah.
So I think, and again, I'm going to ask my colleagues who were on the work group to jump in if they remember something differently. I think the idea for not expanding on number 4 was to allow LEAs to really make the determination at the local level. What does it mean? What does ready mean? What does ready to take on the responsibilities mean? We didn't want to get into defining what that looks like. We wanted our LEAs to continue to do that during their own hiring processes.
And I understand that. I just didn't know if that was already something that LEAs have in place.
Which kind of goes back to
I'm
Karen's
talking
point.
and I'm muted. Sorry. I understand that, but I didn't know if there was something already in place where it's like a checklist. They've met this, and this in order to take on more, additional responsibilities. I just didn't know if that was already out there, if they're already doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Joy, I don't think as the work group dug into that about each LEA because there's 24, so we didn't know. It was a group of us, and we all decided that LEA should define how they're going to do this themselves.
Okay.
Not us.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, I think 4 just stands out as feeling subjective. Everything else feels like very objective. And so hearing the spirit behind 4, I wonder if it's more something along the lines of candidate is recommended by, other teacher leaders or other licensed principals, something that we can sort of say like, yes, this happened, or no, it didn't. Otherwise, I think LEAs may also struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, we could use the statutory language. It could read, candidate is recommended by the, teacher leaders, other licensed principals, and distinguished principals in the county, and is on a list of qualified individuals provided to the superintendent, or something to that nature. We could lift that language. We can make that recommendation.
Yeah, that feels like something you can say yes or no to.
I think that's a good idea.
I'm still concerned though, because in taking that out, we still don't know what that process is. And so if there are issues of equity in that, then they're going to remain. That's what I'm more so concerned about is I understand allowing LEAs the autonomy of defining that, the criteria for themselves. But I am also worried about if they're, and I guess that's why I asked that question, Kelly, is like, is it approved by anyone?
It will be approved by the AIB as part of their submission.
Okay, all right, okay.
Dr. Dyson had her hand up, and so does Josh.
All right, Dr. Dyson.
Sure. I just wanted to just elaborate a little bit for Frederick County. In terms of selecting principals, even APs, we have a leadership development program. And so that's one of the ways we would address this particular area, not just looking at the evaluation, but if they've gone through our elite program, we think about, how did they present there? What were their strengths? Are they matched for the positions that we have open? So that's what the conversation would look like. And we partner with HR really in screening to meet the first set of requirements. And then we use our questions really during the interview process to determine their readiness. So we don't make that predetermination before screening. We really try to just screen on the basic criteria, and then we allow people to come to the table, and we use that as an opportunity to dig deeper and allow them to talk about their work. But the leadership development program is one of the best ways, I think, that allows us to get at the strengths of the candidate and those opportunities for growth. And even in the opportunities for growth, it does not mean that they will not qualify. It means that we would set them up perhaps with someone who can help build, close those gaps and build on their strengths.
Dr. Dyson, I think that was brought out during the work group also.
All right, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Josh?
Yeah, I was just curious if MSDE has ever pre-blueprint or now during blueprint career ladder discussions come up with recommendations. Like, here's a sample process that a county or an LEA could adopt.
Absolutely. But yes, that is part of our technical assistance process.
So then I'm assuming, since that's part of the technical assistance, that would be in place when the LEA goes through what's in number 4.
So to be clear, I think the question was like, is that like a standard procedure that we utilize when something is introduced? I don't want to speak on behalf of the AIB because the criteria for the submission for July 1st, 2025 will be published jointly, is my understanding, from the AIB and MSDE. So I don't know if part of that publication will include an example. Examples are tricky because sometimes, examples are very helpful, and sometimes when you give an example, you end up with 24 of those. So, we don't want to stifle innovation inadvertently by providing an example.
But that makes sense. And it just makes sense that there's some kind of guidance given if there isn't an advanced system in place like Frederick.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So that I think would address some of the concerns about number 4, especially if there's a question about whether the rigor and skills and dispositions vary that much between the LEAs. So I take it then, of course, that MSDE can and does offer technical assistance. And that, of course, could fit into number 4. All right. Before we move on, are there any other concerns about number 4?
This is Kim Moore. I have a question. 2 questions. The first one is, what does AIB stand for?
Accountability and Implementation Board.
Thank you. And my second question is, I'm trying to follow the line of discussion around this for number 4. And I know that there's 24 different LEAs, and they all have their own criteria. And then the MSDE is we're trying to propose making recommendations, but like, where in the process or in the step, I don't know if anybody can answer this question, like, I know that the locals make their recommendations and then it goes to their Board of Educations, and then their board has to accept these administrative positions. So where in that process does does the board call up or contact MSDA or look at the regs and say, this is what this is, or they just assume that the LEAs has been in consultation with MSDE and the regs and just say, okay, we'll look at what they give us and then approve? Like, where, I don't know if anybody can answer that. I'm thinking out loud.
So I can take a stab at it, and then I'll turn to my neighbor who's on a county board. So MSDE is not the employer of educators in Maryland, and we are not consulted. So with an exception, superintendents. Local superintendents do have to be approved by the state superintendent of schools. To my knowledge, that is the only position. So to answer your question, whatever criteria is adopted by the State Board of Education, we would regulate it. This is something that we would want to put in regulations to make it very clear. And when we adopt regulations in this state, there's a process of providing the information to our LEAs, to our local superintendents, providing technical assistance, providing training. Depending on the regulation, you're talking about different groups of LEA employees. But we would not expect them to just know the information in a new regulation without sharing that information. So in this particular example, this information would need to go to local district leadership and county boards and principals and anyone involved, HR involved in the hiring process.
All right, anyone else?
Well, Kelly's kind of looking at me to follow up on that. So boards of education are the what? And the superintendents then are our employees, and they are the how. And so when new laws or regulations come, basically the system kicks in and interprets them and implements them. And so boards of ed do policy, and systems do regulation that match. And again, it's the policy is the board's feelings or how we see things should be done, the what, and regulations are then the process and the how. So a lot of times boards of ed, even though we have to follow the law, we are not steeped in this, and a lot of this is going to go on, that I think you're asking is going to go on in HR and other departments within the system. I don't know if that helped or not.
No, it does. Thank you. All right, so I'm looking to see if there's any other questions or comments. All right, so I believe coming out of this discussion, there is support for taking number 4 and changing it so that it does match the statute language. Is there anybody who would object to that? Okay, that would produce some clarity. All right, so let's continue through this. My recommendation is to continue, but take a break before we go to proposed NBC waiver. All right, so can you continue to lead us through that?
Sure. So looking at number 5, successful completion of a principal induction program for new principals within 1 year of taking the assignment. Now, I did share, and I will share again, that the work group was torn on this particular recommendation because it was the idea of having all principals go through an induction program was supported, but the question was, what does that induction program look like? And until there are state standards that provide guardrails and guidelines for a principal induction program, not everybody was comfortable making this recommendation. So it came with a caveat. I will also tell you that this would be an unfunded mandate. So I should put that out there.
I guess a question that I would have around this is, what happens if they don't do an induction program? Like, are they originally like conditional and then they become like, what happens if they don't complete it or aren't successful?
Mm-hmm. So the way that this is written, I would interpret that as meaning that they would need to step down from that level of the career ladder.
Another question is, same thing, is this new to statute or no? This is, number 5 is new?
This is not in statute.
Okay.
So what the statute says is that when developing this criteria, the state board may require principal induction. That's what the statute says.
Got it.
So then it would be incumbent on each LEA to develop an induction program if they don't have one?
Yes.
Okay, and we would have to create criteria for what that looks like, or did they get to decide that as well?
That would also be a decision.
Okay.
Is the language may because it's not funded right now? Is that sort of the rationale?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't know the rationale of why the statute says may.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor and Ms. Meadows, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of our thinking around that was we have, over a long period of time, raised the rigor for teachers. And I've been on this board for a long time. We've never done this for administrators. It has always been, let's tinker with the teacher to achieve success in closing achievement gaps. And that speaks a lot.
So
I had a question. This is Kim Moore. Just to follow up with what Sandra said, based on there was something that said that like all of the different 24 LEAs have like their own induction program, or should, since it's already been written before. This bullet here is asking to put this into regulation for licensures for principals.
Great question. So what this criteria does is this is the criteria to move of 2028, and that is a very good point.
At our last meeting, someone had brought up the situation where a principal may not have the ability to go through the NBC process, like if they're not able to get into a classroom. So say we have an AP in a situation like that. Is there anything?
There is. So I think that there's probably some misinformation out there, and I'm in complete transparency, not the best person to talk to about it, but I can absolutely bring in our national board coordinator at our next meeting if you want to question her, because she's much better at talking about this. But she assures me that there are absolutely ways that one can go through the candidacy in a different position in the school building as long as they have access to a roster of students. I do know that the classroom it has to be a rostered classroom. It can't be, after school. It can't be during the summer where you gather students. It does have to be a rostered classroom. And it does have to be in the grade band and the area that individual is seeking for national board certification. But there are ways that it can be done, and the national board does provide guidance on those situations.
All right, anyone else?
This is Nikki. I just wanted to add to that there are many practitioners who leave the actual school system completely and still go back and complete. They are able to contact a school at MSEA. We have multiple staff who not taught in 20 years and been at MSEA for 20 years, and they're still nationally board certified. So it's very much possible to do.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else? All right. Go
Can I
ahead.
ask one more question?
Of course.
I'm just curious because talking about grade or the bands, does a principal or does somebody moving to principal of a high school, say, need to complete a grade band that relates to that high school, or could it
Student group.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so my recommendation, looking at the time, is that we stop discussion on this now, that we bring this back for one of the agenda items and so forth, and that will give you time to update the language under the first part that we've discussed today, and then we would pick up with the proposal for the MBC waiver process. And looking at the agenda, there are several
for having me. Just as the agenda shows, I wanted to give everyone a brief update about the work group and the need to address some of the concerns about the limitations for the pathways of licensure for our fine arts educators. So our office is working very closely with the Office of Teaching and Learning and Instructional Support Services and the Director of Comprehensive Fine Arts Education, Elizabeth Devereaux, and her team. We have already drafted a letter and nomination invitation.
All right, I will entertain a motion to adopt the December 5th, 2024 PSTEB minutes.
Dr. Taylor moves.
Quick on the button again. All right, Dr. Taylor, I need a second, which is Karen. The button again. All right, Dr. Taylor, I need a second, which is Karen Yoho. All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Actually, just hold your hand up. All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so we have our minutes adopted, and now that causes us to move now on to our agenda for February. Appreciate the number of little things that come up from time to time. I'm amazed that everything is written as clearly as it is, because this is monumental stuff we've been working with. All right, so now correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've made it through our entire agenda for today. Is there anybody who has anything to add for the good of the group or the information of the group?
Darren, it's Chris McGee. I have a quick question, and this is going to take us all the way back to the state board report. When she was sharing and talking about the additional exam